The grand chandelier shimmered like captured sunlight in the mansion's ballroom, its golden light spilling across the polished marble floors. The air was thick with the scent of roses imported from Paris, and every guest was dressed in the kind of elegance that spoke not just of wealth but of privilege. At the center of it all stood Adrien Moreau, a millionaire known for both his fortune and his flair for theatrics. On that crisp afternoon, in front of a small audience of high society, he made a spectacle that silenced the room. With a faint smile, he held up 4 gleaming black unlimited credit cards and handed them one by one to 4 women standing in glamorous gowns. Gasps echoed, and eyes widened at the display of power and excess. But no one could predict that what happened next would not come from the millionaire, or the 4 women, but from the quiet maid standing in the corner with yellow cleaning gloves still on her hands. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the hidden strength within ordinary people, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us bring more powerful, heart-touching stories to life. Adrien Moreau had lived his life believing everything had a price. Born into wealth, his days were filled with board meetings, art auctions, and extravagant dinners where the rich competed in silence over who could appear most untouchable. Yet beneath his confident smile lay a loneliness he never admitted. The 4 women he had invited that day, Isabelle in scarlet, Marcia in black, Clarice in gold, and Selina in deep navy, were all accustomed to luxury, each vying for a piece of his attention, each believing that charm and beauty would win his heart. For Adrien, however, the gesture of giving them unlimited cards wasn't about love. It was about control, about seeing who would shine brightest under the weight of endless wealth. But among the polished marble, the silk gowns, and the glittering chandeliers, one figure did not belong. Her name was Sophia Levine, the maid who had worked quietly in Adrien's mansion for nearly 2 years. She wore a simple uniform, her brown hair tied back neatly, her eyes downcast whenever guests were present. To most, she was invisible, just another part of the staff whose presence was taken for granted. Yet Sophia carried a heaviness that wealth could never measure. She was a single mother, raising her 8-year-old son, Elias, after losing her husband to an accident in a factory where safety was overlooked in pursuit of profit. She worked long hours, often skipping meals so that her boy could eat, and saved every coin she could in the hope of one day giving him a better life. When Adrien's hand swept the air theatrically and the women gasped at their unlimited cards, Sophia was in the corner, quietly collecting glasses left on a side table. Her heart tightened as she watched. Not because she envied the women, but because she couldn't help but think of how many children went hungry that night in the city while so much wealth was tossed around as a game. She tried to push the thought away, maids were not supposed to think, only serve. Yet Adrien's eyes caught hers for a fleeting second, and something shifted. The 4 women clutched their cards with gleaming eyes, whispering excitedly about what they would buy. One dreamed aloud of a villa in the south of France, another of jewels that could rival queens, another of an endless wardrobe of couture. The room buzzed with superficial delight. But then Adrien, curious and almost mischievous, turned his gaze back to Sophia. He smirked and asked, "And you, maid, what would you do if I gave you one of these?" The room fell silent. The women turned to stare at her, their expressions a mix of amusement and disdain, as though the very idea was absurd. Sophia froze, her hands trembling as she set the glasses on the tray. She could feel every eye piercing through her. Her instinct was to bow her head and say nothing, to fade into the background as she always had. But then she thought of Elias, his thin frame, his hopeful eyes, the way he asked her why other children at school had so much while he had so little. With a deep breath, Sophia raised her eyes, and for the first time, her voice did not carry the weight of servitude but of truth. She said she would not take the card for herself. Instead, she would use it to open a shelter for children who had no home, for mothers who had no place to go after being abandoned, for the hungry and the lost who wandered the streets with nothing but despair. She spoke of creating a place where laughter could return to those who had forgotten what it sounded like. Her words were not rehearsed, not polished like the speeches of the wealthy, but raw, trembling, and real. The silence that followed was heavier than gold. The 4 women shifted uncomfortably, their cards clutched tightly to their chests, as though afraid someone might take them away. Adrien's smirk slowly faded, replaced by something unfamiliar even to him. He had expected greed, perhaps a desperate plea for escape, but instead, he found sincerity that cut deeper than any jewel. In that moment, the chandelier above seemed to shine brighter, as though the light itself was listening. The women laughed nervously, trying to dismiss Sophia's words, but Adrien's mind was elsewhere. He remembered his own childhood, the cold halls of privilege where warmth was measured only in money, never in love. He realized that in all his years of excess, not once had he given without expecting something in return. Yet here was a maid, with nothing, offering to use wealth not for herself but for the forgotten. Days passed after that evening, but Adrian could not shake Sophia's words. The women flaunted their new cards, boasting of trips and luxuries, but their laughter sounded hollow. Adrian found himself visiting the quarters where Sophia lived within the mansion, asking her about her ideas. She hesitated, thinking it was mockery, but slowly she shared her vision, an abandoned warehouse she passed on her way home, a place she dreamed could be turned into a haven. She described small beds, warm meals, a playground for children, and shelves of books to teach them stories of hope. And then, one morning, something remarkable happened. Adrian called a press conference, but instead of announcing a new business venture or art acquisition, he announced the funding of a new community shelter. He revealed that the idea had come not from consultants or partners, but from a maid who dared to dream. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward, and for the first time in years, Adrian spoke not as a millionaire flaunting his wealth, but as a man inspired by kindness. The shelter opened months later, its walls painted with colors chosen by the children themselves. Sophia stood at the entrance on opening day, tears glistening in her eyes as she watched Elias laugh with other children on the new playground. Mothers wept as they received warm meals, and the air was filled with the sound of joy reborn. Adrian was there too, not as the untouchable millionaire, but as a man who had discovered that true wealth was measured not in cards or jewels, but in the lives one touched. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. It helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of the power of compassion and humanity.